so just engaging and articulate and thoughtful. And I really am stoked to be talking to you. And I just think you have so much to say.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and like I was saying, I'm excited to talk about things that are obviously yay the film, but like let's talk about other life things. Let's do it.
Great. Yeah, I saw that you wrote and directed this short film on eating disorders, which is something I'm super passionate about talking about. I struggled with eating disorders for 13 years. I'm now in recovery and have been in recovery for a few years. And I look back on that time of my life with so much sadness. I think of it as so many years wasted. And my hope is that just talking about eating disorders in a more honest and vulnerable way can maybe help some people to suffer less or put a stop to their eating disorder, or at least be encouraged or inspired in some way, or feel less alone. Any of those things is kind of what I'm trying to do by talking about them. So I would love to talk with you about eating disorders and your experience with them as well, if you're down.
Absolutely. Very down, and very much down for that messaging. I think talking about them is one of the only way to kind of demystify this very sort of shrouded in secrecy and shame thing that is an eating disorder.
Oh my God, 100%. Can I get just like the history of your eating disorders, when they first began, what that looked like? Do you have any initial early memories?
Yes. So I I grew up and I was always like a larger sized kid. Like I loved food growing up. Food was a big part of my family. I come from a Russian family, so like they like from Russia. So like cooking big family meals is very much a thing. And I always just remember my mom is a big dieter. My mom is a big dieter, always has been. By the way, love her dearly. She's a rock in my life. And it was I always saw that she was happiest and that she was most kind of at her top game when she felt like her diet was going well. And so very early it was like, Misha, eat some vegetables, Misha, maybe not the chocolate. It was very sort of like ingrained into my ideation that food is something that should be controlled or portioned, and that you are successful when food is maybe on the lower side of portions. That kind of like always seeped into my brain.
Sure.
But like I'm incredibly queer, and I love that that's me now. But my parents are incredibly conservative, so I did not have any kind of we didn't say the word gay in my house. The first time that I encountered the word gay was accidentally on a beach, when like a sign for best gay dancing on the beach was like on one of the boats on the waves and like kind of advertising. And I asked my dad to read the sign to me, and he said best pause dancing on the beach. He wouldn't say the word. That's how like, yeah. So right around the time that I was, 12, 13, I was starting to realize, okay, I'm definitely not straight. I'm not straight. And that was also the time when I felt the need and desire to be like liked by others for the first time. Like I was a very antisocial kid up until then. And somewhere between dealing with my queerness and wanting to be part of like the social circles, I started dieting intensely, and I launched headfirst into anorexia nervosa straight up. And that was at 13 years old. And from there, I was hospitalized pretty quickly within 6 months. After hospitalization, as many people with eating disorders do, the eating disorder evolved, some binge eating, some heavy bulimic behaviors. And that was really on and off all the way through a good amount of, all the way up until like 18, 19. And I was in and out of facilities for both eating disorders and drug addiction, actually. I don't like to say that I'm recovered. I don't think that's ever something. My philosophy is I'm actively in recovery. I've chosen recovery. And so literally the title of my film, Every Day, is every day for me is a conscious decision to maintain my recovery and choose recovery. And so I like to keep it as an ongoing process, but that's kind of my history.
Why is it that you choose to every day maintain recovery, and that it is kind of an active ongoing process for you?
For me, I think that it's very much the nature of addiction that dictates that for me. So my eating disorder and my drug addiction history have very much intertwined, as they often do. And I've had as recently as the past couple of years, such big ups and downs with both of them. And, you get it. Being in the public eye, there's something that's so intensely and sickly gratifying about hitting some sort of like bizarre and unrealistic weight goal, or like being complimented on something that's killing you. Oh
my God. Yes.
it's just it's so gross and invasive. But for me, I'm so up and down with often small, big, medium relapses that it does not serve my mental health to champion and to celebrate being recovered, because I know my falls personally are so big when I fall from that height of like, I'm recovered and now I've relapsed in any way, shape, or form. It's so hard to climb back up. And I've actually found a lot more peace in being able to say, today was you relapsed today, Misha. That was not the healthy behavior. And tomorrow you will do better. And that is fine.
What was your body image like then before, prior to eating disorders? Did you feel like you had generally decent body image, or was it something that there was kind of an underlying gnawing discontent with it? How would you describe it?
I've always hated my body. I've never known a time when I did not dislike my body. And it was, as many people with eating disorders kind of experience, it's like kind of a perfect storm. I think I remember even you talking about this in one of your previous episodes, and I geeked out about it. But it's like, I was bullied a lot as a kid because I was awkward. I was rather large. I had, horrible acne from a really young age. Like I didn't know how to make friends. My parents didn't really socialize me in any kind of intense way, because in Russian culture, you go to school, you get good grades, you come home, you play 3 different instruments, you go to bed. That was my life. And on top of that, being stifled in every which way, as a kid wanting to wear dresses, as a kid wanting to play with dolls, or, put paint on my face, and things that I now recognize were my queerness, like literally begging to come out. But all of these things about me were so suppressed. And then in school, I was so, just outcasted and bullied. And so I always felt that there was inherently something wrong. There is something wrong with me. It's probably something that people can see. Therefore, it is my body. So I've never known a reality that was anything but that. And so when I was given, or when I found this dieting, this exercising, this losing intense amounts of weight very quickly, it was, as many people with the eating disorder experience, it's control. I felt in control. I felt powerful. I felt like I could accomplish anything because I can now do this to my body and nobody can take this away from me. Which is obviously incredibly problematic thinking, but that was my superpower at the time.
Well, I also think it's really important to talk about that type of thinking honestly, because I think it's something practically, if not everyone, most people with eating disorders experience, or who have had eating disorders experience. And I think that just pretending like they're just completely negatives and that there's no sort of positive reinforcement that they're getting from them is denying the reality of them, and then actually probably setting back the narrative of eating disorders further. So I'm glad that you're willing and able to talk about that side of things, because I feel like it's something that some people are kind of resistant to talk about. It's like, well, I don't want to talk about the positives because then,
But I mean, I think you're absolutely right. It sets a narrative back, because food is such an integral part of our lives, right? Body image is such an integral part of our lives.
Eating disorders in film and media are romanticized, but specifically to the her. Mm-hmm. I don't even know how to ask this question, and I have no authority in it, but how is the her, or how do you think the her of eating disorders is different from the they of eating disorders?
I'm going to walk this back to a positive experience and then talk about all the negative that is built into that.
Right.
I recently came out as non-binary, and it was, literally, I can't ever talk about it without not getting goosebumps, because like it was such a formative, positive moment in my life. I'm in my apartment. I'm alone. So my roommate was away visiting his boyfriend, and I was just sitting in quarantine thinking about myself, my queerness, all this stuff. And, it really bubbled up to the surface. Okay, Misha, you hate he, him. I do not identify with he, him pronouns. I'm not a man. That is not something that I identify with. Not a woman. I don't identify with she, her. So they then came about, non-binary happened. It was midnight. I'm in my apartment. I'm naked because I'm by myself. And my shame about my body and the way it looks and the way it moves is so deep, unfortunately, that I don't even like dance around my apartment naked for joy when I'm by myself, even, because I feel that some invisible eye is watching me and commenting on how ugly I look. That is a thing that is in my head, unfortunately. And for the first time in my adult life, I truly put on Lady Gaga, of course, and I danced around my apartment for actual joy in this electric way, because the declaration to myself, not on social media yet, not to my friends, not anything, of non-binary and rejecting the he him was so freeing to me in my body that I felt the desire to dance like literally nobody was watching. So I guess when it comes to eating disorders and how they're often characterized with the she her, and how, even growing up as a man and going through eating disorder treatment as a man, was so alienating to me, because it already felt like nobody had a way to talk to me, because most of the people around me in some of these hospitals were girls, and a lot of the treatment was oriented towards, for lack of a better word, the female experience. So I felt like from the get, nobody understood me, and I felt like there was no place for me and my eating disorder and my thoughts, because I was already not the typical thin white girl that was often going through this in the cultural narrative we have now.
Okay, so then you enter recovery at what age for you?
So it's actually tough, because my eating disorder kicked into such high gear at 13, 14. And so, I'm a minor, my parents are in charge of me, and I dove pretty heavily into both eating disorder and drug addiction behavior so early and so intensely that I went from physically decently healthy to I literally died, like heart stopped, died. And it all happened so quickly within a period of 6-7 months that my parents got I type A personality, we will go for it and then some.
Me too, baby. Let's get into it.
Yeah. So I mean, part of my whole history is that I actually got sent away to residential treatment centers. And it's a whole nother beast, because I went to those really scary places in Utah, and there was a whole conversion therapy aspect there. Like my next project that I'm writing is absolutely about my experience inside this crazy, corrupt, seedy world of the troubled teen industry, because that was my whole childhood. I didn't have a high school experience. I got kicked out of 2 different public high schools for being a raging eating disorder and drug addict human. And then I spent the rest of my teenage years inside these facilities.
It's so isolating. It seems like the only thing that it's going to do, in my mind, would make the issue worse, because where's the community? Where's the empathy? Where's the compassion? Did you feel like you were just being, what was your experience once you entered recovery? Were you
I can't feel. I want to make a distinction that I actually don't think I entered recovery until around 18 or 19 years old, when I finally became an adult and kind of went on my own. Because up until then, inside these programs, I was a literal prisoner, obviously, but also their mode is to sit you down from 5:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. every single day in their various forms of grueling therapy and cleaning and physical drills and hiking through the desert. And you are left with nothing but your own shit. And you're forced to look and smell and interact with your own shit for God knows how many months, years in my case. But the idea is basically to break you down so that you enter society as a reformed individual. But I have yet to figure out where the fucking reform was. It was very much like, you are wrong. You've fucked up your life. You have now these issues to deal with, and you're going to sit in it until you figure it out. They're really problematic places, and it's hard to talk about, only in that my parents love me so deeply, and I now as an adult realize that. And they were given this pitch about these facilities that would fix me in every way, because they weren't able to, my parents. And it is such a lie. And unfortunately, I got the really shit end of the stick when it came to treatment. So my recovery started when I decided to get better, because I wanted more out of my life. And that was around 18, 19. Until then, it was very much like I was literally a prisoner, mentally and physically.
I do feel like in order to properly enter recovery, it really has to be a decision of the self. I don't think it can be pushed or prodded or anything that you can be led to. I do feel like it just has to be that turn in your mentality, that choice to put yourself first, that taking of accountability. And I think it's a difficult thing to, because eating disorders affect so many young people. I feel like that level of accountability can be really difficult to take on when you're a young person.
Yes.
And you entered recovery at a much earlier age than I did. So I'm curious, what got you there? What do you think it was that made you go, you know what, I'm going to take this into my own hands. It's time for me to get better. It's time for me to work on this?
I mean, I remember practically what happened. I was given the choice by my parents to either, oh, let me make sure my computer did not fall asleep on me. Love technology. No, we're still recording. I was given the choice to either, essentially, I was, the facility that I was currently at, it's one of these trouble team facilities, was not going to give me a proper high school diploma. It would be a sort of certificate. And I would not have what my parents always billed as the only bright future possible, which is a college degree and a career. That's the only bright future that a Russian parent ever wants for their child, truly and honestly. And I was given the choice by them to either stay in this facility and potentially have a quote unquote shit life, because I wouldn't have what they saw as a golden ticket, the high school diploma, or I could get my shit together, actually attempt recovery, and my parents would muscle me out of this facility and get me into some kind of normal high school, boarding school, something that would give me a high school diploma. And I don't know what it was, and maybe it really is that internalized ideology from my parents, but the idea that, oh, this is a defining moment. I have to choose if I'm going to graduate high school or not. For some reason, it kicked something into high gear for me. And I, at least in a triage type way, put the eating disorder aside, put the drug addiction aside, and said, Misha, you gotta get your shit together, and you have to get yourself a high school diploma somehow. And that set the ball rolling. I ended up going to a boarding school because I legally, literally couldn't go home because of all the shit that I pulled. And I ended up getting a high school diploma from this school that turns out it's a school for the arts. They accepted me based on a fucking song that I sang for them, because that way they didn't care about my grades, because I didn't have any. I had literally pass fail from a fucking facility in Utah. And they funneled me into acting college. So acting literally happened as a result of me deciding, okay, I guess I'm going to get my shit together. And I was just kind of dropped into the world of theater and arts because of that. But it was very much something in my brain clicked that if I didn't attempt to get my shit together right then, I was going to steer towards a path that I probably would have a much harder time digging out of later in life.
I feel like finding that thing that you're passionate about can be really, really instrumental in recovery, because it almost feels like a positive thing, as opposed to just fighting to get rid of this negative thing. You're now suddenly fighting for this positive thing. Did you have a similar experience with acting? Was it like acting came in your life and you were just like, oh my God, this is my fucking calling? Or what was that like?
This is really problematic to say, because I'm literally now promoting a film in which I am acting, by the way, which I'm incredibly proud of.
Yeah.
But I feel like I've actually steered even more into the direction that you just talked about, in that I am at my happiest when I am doing things like making a film about mental health, or doing a podcast like this, or like my next project, which I'm, crossing all the fucking fingers in the world that it will be this amazing thing that I create about the, teen mental health in general. I love performing, and it's a lens through which I think I can get a lot out there into the world. But like, one of the most gratifying projects that I've done recently is I produced, without my face literally not on it in any way, shape, or form, the National Eating Disorders Association's first Pride campaign.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
We literally, I got some queer production friends of mine together, and we interviewed a bunch of LGBTQIA individuals about their experiences with body image and mental health. And we released it all the way up until now, way beyond Pride, on their Instagram and socials. And it fills me with this kind of buzz that I use acting and writing to like get there. But the thing that I want to like do in life is very much, I don't know, to make mental health more accessible. There's an entire world of Misha where I'm a mental health professional, and acting and writing and directing and all that kind of shit never happened. But I'm very blessed to have parents that were so invested in my education, even when it got incredibly difficult. And, being able to use words and being very articulate is something that was so prized in my household. So if that's my secret weapon, and I'm able to, that's what drives me, I guess is what I'm saying. That positive uplift, which I completely agree with you on. You can't just clamp down the negative on an eating disorder. It will inevitably rear its ugly head again.
Yeah.
It's the same with addiction. It's all the same. For me, it's fighting towards something positive. And to answer your question with a little bit of shiny hope, I mean, yes, there were times, especially early on in my career when I was auditioning and things were just very kind of, cutthroat as they often are, that would in its own way get me through because I was fighting for something that was bigger than me, a role in an amazing project, to get my film into a film festival, things that uplifted me and the work that I was doing. And I could put the eating disorder squid that's fucking attached to my head on a shelf and say, you can't fuck with me right now. I'm doing too many important things.
I like it being referred to as the eating disorder squid.
Oh, it's a whole thing. I have a whole visualization about it. It's a little black ugly squid that sucks on the back of my head, and I have to like unstick it and put it on a shelf and say, "Fuck you." But
well, it's so helpful to have like I find having visualizations for things is so helpful in terms of like compartmentalizing, setting it aside. That's great. I'm gonna use the squid.
Do it.
I want to get into more of the what you touched on with body image and how that affects identity and how that affects mental health. But first, I would love to hear what that process was like with your parents and how you accepting your sexuality. How did they react to that? And you seem like you're in such a good place with your parents now. What was that arc like?
It was a tumultuous one. As eating disorder and drug stuff really started to pervade my teens. And I was running away. I had a really problematic boyfriend. I was everything. I threw all that rebellious shit at the wall. The cops actually outed me to my parents during one of my running away hospitalized escapades.
Wait, what happened?
At the time Misha was he, him. And so, we picked him up with his boyfriend. And I remember I wasn't in the room for that, but I was in the room for when I was deposited back home by the police, and we sat around the dinner table. And again, I must emphasize that my parents and I are in such a better place now, but with the limited understanding of queer culture from growing up in Soviet Russia, my parents sat down with me, and it was so clear to me that my eating disorder behavior, as deadly as it was at the time, not as bad as this. My drug addiction behavior, not as bad as this. The worst news they got that day was that their son was queer. The worst news.
Wow.
And the narrative went all over the place from you're going to get a disease. That's what happens to these people. Society will never accept you. You have to find a way you have to change this. You can't make this decision like it's a choice. And that honestly set me even down a worse path with feeling the need to rebel and control my body even more because my parents were now outwardly not supportive of me existing, in my opinion. And unfortunately, a lot of the facilities that I went to have a real conversion therapy aspect baked into them, especially in Utah. It's so bad. They basically frame it as like all the problematic lifestyle choices that you're making, the drugs, the starving yourself, and of course, who you're dating. Like, we have to change all this. Don't you want to be better? Can't wait to blow the lid off that shit. But from there, it was very much a me journey because my parents and I did not talk for many years. We didn't communicate much at all.
Wow.
And I went through college as a gay man, and I found some identity there, but I always felt a little bit or a lot of it alienated by especially kind of Hell's Kitchen or the WeHo kind of gay culture. And I just never felt at home. And, then I started experimenting with gender expression. And, as I moved to New York and was trying to become an actor and, doing photo shoots with friends in, traditionally feminine clothing or, wearing heels. Oh my goodness, on a night out, like the very little things that were so intensely liberating for me. Like I wore heels to a birthday party of mine, to like a bar that my friends and I often went to. And just like, I felt like a fucking superhuman that night because all of a sudden I was showing people what I felt on the inside, which was a very new experience for me. And it all kind of culminated in this most recent kind of declaration, and that I am outside of the binary, and that feels so fucking good. And it's funny, the positive things about the eating disorder that you feel, the empowered from feeling lighter and thinner, and all of these kind of the empty feeling that drives people with eating disorders so forward, is I got a real dose of kind of what I believe to be the healthy version of that with the non-binary coming out. I felt lighter. My skin felt electric. I can't talk about this moment enough because it was so gratifying to feel a positive version of this empowerment that my eating disorder used to give me. So that's kind of that arc.
Yeah, no, completely. All right. So body image and identity.
Mhm.
How do you think they're related? Do you think they're completely just enmeshed? Do you think that positive body image, how does that impact your identity versus negative body image?
So my life has been defined by negative body image, right? Like I, the amount of hours, days, weeks, months that I've spent hating my body, judging myself for what I put in my body or what I don't put in my body, trying to aggressively change my body, that was my identity. And I think that's really, I mean, tell me if you agree, but like my eating disorder was my best friend, my identity, a better boyfriend or partner than I've ever had. It everything. It became my everything. It's a voice that I knew and know so well, and it felt like it was my best friend that knew me better than anybody. So I actually I think that they are incredibly enmeshed, body image and identity, but it feels like this thing where wires get crossed, right? Like so early on for some reason, and it sounds like you have very much a similar experience. Like you buy into this thing that the eating disorder will solve everything. It will make you beautiful and liked and powerful and all of these crazy, crazy, crazy things that shouldn't happen in a young mind, but they do. And so my process has been divorcing painfully. It's still a process. Divorcing my identity from this thing, this separate thing, the little black squid, that is my eating disorder. And it's fucking scary. And on the daily, like even when I'm like, freaking meditating, journaling, or even simply like going out to eat with friends, it's weird to tell the squid to sit on the shelf because the squid was my identity for so fucking long. And I'm intensely jealous. I don't think I've ever been more jealous of anything in my years of living than people who have an identity that is not enmeshed in their body image. I think that's so magical and mystical to me. And I wish I knew what it felt like. But
I had this experience in eating disorder recovery where I was actually terrified about what my identity would mean without the eating disorder because I felt like I was nothing without it. Genuinely, I felt like, well, this takes up 90% of my fucking thoughts every day of my life. This is how I'm oriented. This is the way in which I go about the world is through this eating disorder lens. Without that lens, what is reality? What does reality look like?
Yeah, that. Like,
yeah,
it's. I mean, yes. I mean, the answer, literally, just yes to all of that. It's scary. It's a scary breakup, and it's a scary thing to. I mean, it's an abusive relationship. We've seen this in eating disorder literature time and time again, and unfortunately, it's incredibly true. Like, it's an abusive relationship that burns hot and heavy, and you want nothing more than to just kind of dive into it. But unfortunately, it is literally killing you. It's been really cool in these tiny little baby steps to find Misha outside of the eating disorder, but it's a scary breakup, and I feel you. My life was my eating disorder for so long.
Right. You're the first person I've heard who's mentioned an eating disorder as a best friend, which I so deeply relate to. Oh my fucking God. My relationship with my mom was very abusive. I didn't recognize that at the time, but I could tell that it was different from what most of my friends or classmates and dance or whatever, what their relationship with their moms going to be. It seemed very different from mine. I was like, we're just much closer. Well, ours is much more special. We're just best friends and that's normal. But when my eating disorder began when I was 12, that was the voice underneath it was the only voice that could sort of get to me stronger than my mom's voice could get to me. And it was also very conditioned by my mom. Like my mom had a history with anorexia. She was hospitalized for it on several occasions. So she was supporting my eating disorder, which only made it stronger and feel like, well, this is the voice of my best friend. While it was an incredibly toxic and abusive relationship, to your point, I at the time didn't realize that. And it felt, and I think that's an important distinction to make because I think at the time when you're in it, it can feel like, no, this is the voice I should listen to. This guy's helping me out here. This is the proper voice. And it's only once you start putting your actual self first and your actual identity ahead of your eating disorder identity that you start to realize, oh, that voice was lying to me all those years. That voice is kind of a bitch.
And which is a mind fuck, right? Because it's like, how on God's green earth do you explain to a very young individual, somebody who's going through like being a child actor, somebody who's like discovering queerness at 12 years old, that voice, this all powerful voice in your head that's telling you how to make it all better is lying to you? What? You can't tell somebody that.
Yes.
And it's still a bunch of mind fuckery to even think about it now. Like I can't pretend like I don't wake up every morning and still say hello to my eating disorder voice. It's there. But the distinction I've been able to make now is that it is in fact my eating disorder voice. It's not my voice. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at, right? Like it's the trusted voice that felt like you, like a part of you when you were growing up and having eating disorders kind of like run your life. It's not your voice. And I wish for fuck's sake that we could kind of figure out, I'm a geek. I want to know like the genetic code that makes this strange kind of self-destructive thing happen in our brains. Like one of the things that I always absorbed in one of the few amazing therapists that I had in this whole litany of treatment that I got that was unfortunately not brilliant, was the quote was, genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger.
Yes.
And that hit me so hard, and it still does to this day, because I reached a point when I realized, especially, my body was literally breaking down. Like I was, every physical symptom of starvation and other eating disorder behaviors and drug addiction behaviors was really riddling me. Like I did a number on myself, and I was getting so sad. I was like, why do I do this to myself? And why can I not seem to find a way out of it? It feels like I've been burdened with this like very heavy, dark affliction that will never fucking leave me. And the therapist brought up, genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger. It ain't your fault that your brain, for some reason, latched onto this coping mechanism, because all it's trying to do is keep you happy and alive. Something happened or is happening inside of you, outside of you, wherever the fuck it is, that is making you feel like you need control and you need happiness and you need to feel loved. And you found something that is giving you that tenfold. So how could you say no to it, especially at a young age?
Right. Then where do you think identity begins once you start to separate, once you start to choose your own voice, right? And set your eating disorder and separate the eating disorder voice from your own voice? Where do you begin to, okay, well, I'm left now with myself. How do you start to work on that identity?
It's a great question.
I know it's a huge question. Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, it's something that I'm literally exploring now today. Like as I'm figuring myself out, I think it's so much softer than people realize. I feel like identity happens in very little moments in life, like relationships, as you start to make friends as an adult, when you can really pick your family. I think, making art certainly has helped me, and finding creative outlets has helped me. But identity is it's this kind of precious little thing that you have to nurture and water and grow. And it's not as simple as, like the influencers that find identity in literally being, face tuned to all good hell on Instagram, or I know some performers that literally don't have a kind of a functioning verbiage outside of what their next TV show is. And
yes,
it's, it's so easy to find these quick fixes: an eating disorder, drug addiction. I'm an actor, I'm an influencer, but that's not your identity. Those are things that you do. Identity is this much softer kind of internal thing that when you're left alone, literally alone in your house, dancing naked potentially, who are you? And what do you like and value? And I am still answering those questions. I do not have a lot of the answers of those questions for myself, but I've been really learning to appreciate that, when I desire to sit down and read a book because I want to, read a love story about queers in like 12th century Ireland or some shit. I do this shit all the time. It's that is part of my identity much more than any eating disorder or any photo shoot or any TV or film project that I do, because it's something that I desire for me and do it when nobody's watching. That is the small little pieces of identity that I'm starting to realize exist outside of these big grand things, whether it be an addiction or a job or whatever it is.
Absolutely. You also mentioned sort of what you like and what you value. And I think that's definitely, I've been thinking about this a lot recently of, well, yeah, what is that? What is the framework of my identity separate from, well, I used to be this thing. I used to have an eating disorder. I used to be, and then here's what I am currently. And again, my mind absolutely goes to the job title, the thing that I'm pursuing. It just wants to latch onto those labels for some sort of comfort, certainty, question mark. I don't know. It's just like, oh, it helps with control, probably, to be honest. It's probably just feeling that sense of control. But I find that when I go back to, well, what are the values that I like to live my life by? It feels more like an engine to my life than an endpoint. It feels more like the process than the result. And it feels a little bit more peaceful. I'm kind of high strung naturally, so I'm not like sitting here chilling with the chamomile tea.
I don't know what that's like at all.
But so I'm glad that you mentioned the values. So I do think that's a really helpful thing for people to hear.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's also one of those things that, like, unfortunately, our society doesn't prize. We live in Western capitalist culture. Like, people want to know what your following is, how much money you can make them, and whether you can get them ahead, and vice versa. Like, that's unfortunately that's the world that we live in, especially in America. And I think that's a big part of, especially why body image and peddling this impossible standard for body image and eating disorder behaviors is so kind of enmeshed in our society, because we're so result oriented. We're so, how can I become famous? How can I become important? How can I become beautiful? How can I become worthy? And that's just, I think, identity, like you were saying, it's about what you value. And it's this, I keep coming back to this, like, soft internal, like, what is going to, like, the engine drive you forward, not get you to an end point.
Right. Can you talk me through sort of your lowest phase in your body image, and then maybe talk about your experience with it now, like where you feel like you're at with it now?
Yeah. Lowest phase was probably, I mean, most definitely, it was at the peak of sort of when my anorexia and bulimia behaviors all kind of melded together, when I was going in and out of inpatient eating disorder treatment. So, like, weeks or months at a time, not being sent away to, like, a facility. And I remember this feeling of trying to hold on to, any kind of weight loss. And I keep going back to my body. I'm a very physical person, and my skin was so dry that it was like peeling off of me because I was so dehydrated. I couldn't think straight. I literally smelled like a rotten banana because my body was literally rotting. Like, it's these things that happen when you abuse your body. And at the time, I was also, also didn't want to be in reality. Drugs of any kind were give me. Like, I didn't care. I didn't have a drug of choice. I was just like, what prescription, illegal drug, anything can get me out of this reality. And I did have this moment when I'm like, oh, Misha, you just don't want to be on planet Earth. And it was probably the only real time in my life when I was incredibly suicidal, and when I felt like depression was something that would kind of overtake me, because nothing seemed to work. The drugs didn't get me far enough off planet Earth. I couldn't get thin enough. I couldn't, purge enough. I couldn't binge enough to fill any kind of void. Nothing was working. And it was this very kind of, for a 14, 15-year-old to have this sort of like out of body experience of, oh, this is how it goes down. This is how you might end. That was that I would consider my lowest. I've certainly had other lows in my life, but that's the one that sticks out of my head. In terms of now, I function very well with anti-inspiration. The film that I made, the eating disorder one, it was anti-inspired by the media that I've seen so far about, again, the thin white women bent over a toilet graciously wiping their lips. Like it, yeah, it's, so knowing that point happened in my life, I can kind of think back to it and say, okay, it's hard. You don't know how you're going to figure out recovery, but you don't want to go there again, to feel like everything was kind of falling out from under me and that nothing was going to ever work and I was never going to be happy again. So where I'm at now is I seek out joy and things that make me happy as medicine, because if I don't, then I'm going to fall back into the behaviors that I know and I know well, which is destroying my mental health and my body for some kind of instant gratification, some kind of high. So it's hard. I'm not somebody who naturally smiles a lot, laughs a lot, all these kinds of things. It's all quite performative for me most of the time. But sometimes going through those motions of finding joy, and those few, like this many people, I'm holding up 3 fingers for those listening, that really like get me and can see me they've picked me up off the floor, Xanax out of my mind on the streets of New York. Like they love me. And I turn to them to like have a fucking movie night, to have some tea and talk. Like I need to seek out the small joy to remind myself that being human and being alive is a very joyous experience, because unfortunately that hasn't been my lived truth for my years of living so far.
Do you consider yourself a more serious person than generally, it sounds like?
Oh yeah, I'm borderline morbid most of the time, and I mean, some of it is personality, right? Like some of it is like I'm kind of dark and sarcastic and all of that, but like some of it's incredibly chemical, and this is where mental health really geeks me out, because like unfortunately the way that I experimented with drugs and the way that I abused my body with an eating disorder, like there's like chemical things that happens to my body at such a formative age when I'm literally going through puberty. You can like I've had literal brain scans done as like, I've become older, and like they try to see what kind of damage I've done to my brain, especially with drugs. And you can point to sections of my brain that are not lighting up the way that they should, because unfortunately I dove so heavily into that behavior so early in life. And I can feel that. I can feel that there are times when everybody around me is laughing, and I know that I should feel some kind of joy about a joke that was told or an event that's going on. And I just can't seem to muster up the good mood chemicals to get there. And that's a shitty feeling, but that's more anti-inspiration. I even more aggressively seek out peaceful, joyous moments, things that make me happy because they make me happy, and not because they're going to win me a fucking Emmy or something. Because you have to. I have to aggressively chase it. So even if it is like taking medicine, even if it is like kind of waking up every day and deciding, Misha, you're going to be happy at 3 p.m. when you see your friends today, you got to just kind of go for it and dive right in. That's where I'm at right now. It's incredibly clinical, and I'm okay with that for a bit.
There you go. I am curious. There's a lot of debate about whether or not eating disorders are an addiction.
I will say that it has helped me personally to view eating disorders as an addiction. And they're a monstrous addiction, because like I was saying earlier, it's not a substance you can put in your body, nor is it a bag of something you can take away from somebody. It is inside of them.
Yeah.
It is baked into your brain somehow. But that's also a very individual thing. Like just like you and I were talking about earlier, like, excuse me, as I burp up 10 beverages that I've had. Just like you were saying earlier, like it's, recovery as an active choice every single day is very helpful for maybe somebody like me, but there's a lot of people that take a lot of pride in being recovered. And that's a difference in ideology already, whether you're talking about addiction or not. So I do personally view eating disorders as an addiction. I think they're an addictive behavior that gives the individual some kind of high and some kind of gratification that is in turn actually detrimental to the individual. So from a very clinical, literally raised by scientists human over here, like, yes, I think eating disorders are an addiction, but I also want to give everybody space to view their eating disorder however they need to view it as separate from themselves. So if it's not an addiction to you, fine. But like, as long as you're able to view it as something that is not part of you, I think that's the key.
Absolutely. No, I think I totally agree. I think it's really important that each person kind of takes into account their own life, their own experience, and decides for themselves how to organize their own thoughts toward their eating disorder. Because I think that's going to help their recovery so much, rather than just adopting kind of whatever the newest, oh, well, it's an addiction. Well, it's not. Well, it's blank. Well, it's whatever. It's like, how does it feel for you, and what's going to help your growth and your recovery the most?
Right. Well, I mean, I'm genuinely curious. Like, what was it? Was there language that helped you with that? Did labeling it as any one thing be like, oh yes, now I can work my way towards recovery?
100% labeling it as an addiction, like you, it completely helped me. I thought, well, there's a lot of people who deal with addiction and who overcome addiction, so that makes it seem like there's hope there. It's not just it's not just who I am. It's not just this thing that's in me biologically because my mom. It's not like this thing that I have to carry on my back all the time. It's a thing that I can find an endpoint in, that I can work on, that I can overcome. And that for me was like hugely helpful and gave me a lot of that hope that I feel like is really important in early recovery.
Yeah. Yes. Real.
How do you think it's related to body image and identity, but more specifically, how do you think body image affects self-esteem? like, to me, it's kind of a chicken or egg. It's like, well, what comes first?
Real.
Is it, right? It's like, how do we do this?
I mean, at this point, how do you even define self-esteem? Like that word in general is so, for me, baked into like early health class, talking about like how to like champion your own mental health in these very stilted sort of 1980s like ways, like self-esteem. Don't bully other people because you will hurt their self-esteem. What is that? What is that thing that people are so afraid of hurting? I don't know. But like body image and self-esteem. Body image is how we see our bodies, right? And that's I think really important. It's not how other people see our bodies. It's how when we look in the mirror, when we visualize ourselves in our head, how we see our bodies. So we move through the world in this body. Therefore, if we don't feel good about the body that we're in, I think of course your self-esteem is going to tank. I think that's like one of the most reductive but helpful ways to look at it. But
yeah,
I have to like separate Misha eating disorder thoughts from these moments in my life. Very few, I can count them probably on two hands, no more. When I've felt pride or joy or excitement about an accomplishment that I've made or a thing that I've done, a friend that I've helped, and it was so outside of me, and yet it brought me so much confidence and joy. Helping, specifically, I'm thinking about a New York friend of mine that was badly in need of just a friend to be there during a really hard time in their life. And I dropped a lot of things. I was in a show at the time. My schedule, 8 shows a week. It's fucking crazy. Like you literally go home and sleep and do it all over again. And I went to their apartment and I spent the night and I, mommed them the best that I could. And I left the next day, the next early morning, underslept, really tired, like probably not going to do a great performance at night, but I did something that I knew was intensely good outside of me. And that boost of self-esteem that I felt from that was this kind of new dose of, oh, you can contribute to life and society and other people in a way that is not about you and that can uplift you. So if I were to say anything about self-esteem, I've loved exploring that side of it,
Totally. I think contribution is huge.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it before. I find I'm just very selfish, I guess, to be honest. And I think also, because of my upbringing and there were a lot of people around me wanting different things with the child acting. It's like the agents, the managers, the network, the record label, the mom, everybody had their different things. That's sort of my experience for my early 20s once I left acting was like, okay, how can I be as selfish as possible and contribute nothing? How can I just do me? But now that I've done me for a while, I'm like, okay, let's expand this a little bit. Let's reach out to other people. Let's contribute.
But there's also nothing wrong with that. Like what I don't want to do is sit here and sound like I have my shit together, that I'm not like one of the most selfish people I know. Like I think being selfish, especially in the framework of celebrating yourself, whether it's divorcing yourself from many people that were trying to pull you in a million different directions when you were far too young to make that decision, or growing, dealing with an eating disorder and addictions and that kind of like where they were eating away at your mind. I think some of the most beautiful moments in my life have also been incredibly selfish. Like I don't think we necessarily need to have selfish as like a negative connotation, especially when it comes to celebrating a body and a mind that unfortunately were probably abused for a good amount of early life for a lot of people.
Oh my God. So well said.
Thank you.
I want to be mindful of your time here. If you don't mind, I've just got 2 quick wrap-up questions and then I'll let you go.
Do it.
Great. So body acceptance and body love. Do you prefer one over the other? Is there one that you actively pursue? Is there one that resonates with you more?
I don't often wake up in the morning and either accept or love what I see. I think both, or what I feel, so much of it is, and I'm sure you know this, but so much of it is feeling too, like what my stomach feels like, how I feel my arms are sitting on my shoulders, how I fit into clothes that I wear every single day. Like I don't often love or accept those things. In fact, most of my time, even in recovery, is spent fighting the thoughts of, God, I hate this. God, I hate how I look. God, I wish I was this or that. I really enjoy a term that actually NEDA, National Eating Disorders Association, their staff and I have been kind of tossing back and forth this past year, body reclamation, because I haven't felt like my body has been mine for years. And whether it's a gender identity thing or queerness thing, or, straight up recovering from a horrendous eating disorder thing, I have very little knowledge base of what it feels like to wake up in the morning and feel like my body is mine. I control it in a healthy, loving, nurturing way and not an abusive way. So if I'm going to stick to any term, I really enjoy body reclamation because I want to reclaim what it's like to live happily and joyously inside a body, not to be constantly at odds with it.
I had this amazing therapist in eating disorder recovery who told me the distinction between body acceptance and body love. Because I went in thinking like, I fucking never liked having boobs. And they always just felt like fucking there. And I mean, my mom died of breast cancer, so I'm sure that like contributed in some way, but I was just like, I don't like these fucking things like on me. They're just excess and lumps and get them off. So I went in like saying, he was like, give me one body part that you hate. And first off, I was like, wait, I can talk about what I hate in recovery? I thought that recovery was about like pretending to like everything. And he was like, no, we got to be honest here with what you actually feel, what you actually think. That was a new concept for me, first off. So then I'm like, okay, I hate my tits, like hate them. What the fuck are these things? And he goes, okay, so let's talk about like how we can maybe try and reframe that in a healthier life. And I was like, I'm never going to love my tits. So why are we even having this conversation? I'm not going to go from my hate to I love magically, woohoo. And he goes, no, that's not what I'm talking about. All that we have to get you to is, you know what? He goes, what do you like better than what do you care about more than your body, period? And at the time I was like, well, writing is what I'm really passionate about. He goes, okay, so we can frame I hate my tits into I don't like my tits, but I care about writing more than I care about my tits. And it was like, you know what? Okay, it's something. It's great, and it was actually really helpful for me in realizing that I didn't have to like love everything or do a pendulum swing from fucking hating everything about myself to just woohoo everything about myself. And I was like, okay, this I can get on board with.
Right, because it's not realistic. That's again, I just like you. Show me somebody that actually believes that. I don't know them.
Exactly. All right. And then finally, to wrap up here, do you have any advice for anybody out there who might be really struggling with their body image right now and just kind of doesn't know where to turn, where to begin, where to start?
I'll be honest that as I move through this more public space and I am asked a very similar question whenever I talk about mental health, I don't ever feel like I have a magical answer. And that's always kind of a shitty feeling when you're on a platform talking about mental health. But I do want to go back to, at least for me, the gender identity and gender expression was so huge for me. And it was a piece of the puzzle that was missing for me for so long. It doesn't have to be that. But if you are struggling with body image, with eating disorder, with this disordered eating or anything in that realm, it's so important to remember that life exists outside of this tiny little universe that you've created in your head, where your body and what you eat or what you exercise or how much you weigh is all that you're thinking about. And it took me, as it takes many people, so long to realize that the world is just straight up more interesting than what that tiny little universe is in your head. And I guarantee you that you're going to enjoy life more if you step out of that universe. That's incredibly reductive, I understand. And it's so hard. And I struggle with it every single fucking day. But having a moment of realizing the big picture and knowing that your worth in this world is just so much more than the literal number on the scale and what you are currently obsessing about, what you ate for breakfast 5 days ago. Like it really is so magical to have those big zoomed out experiences. And I hope that people dealing with body image and body image issues are able to find those zoomed out experiences, because that's what's really honestly gotten me through most of the really tough times.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. You are just fantastic. And I think you're truly going to help so many people. It's like really moving to me.
Stop it. Like literally all the same to you. Like I've spent, when I realized what this interview like subject matter was going to be, so like press craziness, I was like listening to episodes like, she's fucking cool.
Oh, so glad.
I'm so happy to be here. You're fucking awesome.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.